Hello, I'm Lyn Jarvis, contributing editor of Across the Fence, and today we're in historic St. Petersburg, Russia, located on the Neva River at the head of the Gulf of Finland on the Baltic Sea, founded by Peter the Great in 1703. During the Second World War, the siege of St. Petersburg, then called Leningrad, lasted 832 days and was the longest and most lethal sieges of a major city in modern history. It took the lives of more than 1 million people, mainly from starvation, leaving the city abandoned. Despite this, heroism and sacrifice saved their art treasures, and we'll be looking at some of them in a few minutes. It was a tragic yet inspirational time in Russian history. With Shostakovich Leningrad Symphony written during the siege as our background music, the 1941 attack by Nazi Germany has become a part of Russian heritage, and for the older generation, it brings back terrible memories of the cold, bombs, hunger, and loss of loved ones. There was no electricity or water, and the daily food ration shrunk to a half loaf of bread a day. Despite these horrific conditions, the people did not surrender, and finally in January of 1943, the Nazis retreated, burning and looting everything along the way. For Russians of her generation, life has been hard, and they can be forgiven for that tough exterior that hides a kind and courageous heart. She will never know such hardships, and the future of Russia is in her hands. With the internet, tourism, and privatization of business, I predict happier times ahead. Despite living in the second most corrupt country in the world with the most billionaires, the young adults are happy and outgoing. With the average monthly salary in Russia at $1,200, there are some signs, however, that the government is beginning to spend some of their rubles to repair museums, rebuild rundown parks, and upgrade schools, hospitals, and senior housing facilities. More and more Russians have cars, and despite a high-class metro system, the streets and roads are clogged with traffic. Drivers and pedestrians lose patience and ignore all rules of the road. And since there are no places to park, the sidewalks have been commandeered. It's a dangerous situation and needs to be addressed, but more about that later. St. Petersburg was founded in 1703 by Peter the Great, who reigned for 42 years. He was well-liked and a far-sighted and skillful diplomat who created a viable and working government by establishing a strong military force, modernizing schools, and introduced new administrative and territorial divisions in the country. He is buried in the magnificent Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul, the tallest building in the city and a radical departure from the traditional Orthodox churches. With its magnificent spire rising 404 feet into the sky, and at the top, an angel holding a cross. This is his tomb, and people still leave fresh flowers on it, and interestingly, most of the Russian rulers since his time rest here. The most recent being in 1977, under orders from Boris Yeltsin, the remains of Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, who was murdered in 1918. St. Petersburg is one of the world's most beautiful maritime cities, defined by the Neva River and its many canals. For more than 100 years, the Basil Island Lighthouse guided sailors into the port of St. Petersburg. The waterways offer unique views of the city, often called the Venice of the North, as it is built on 44 islands linked by some 600 bridges. This is the Church on Spilled Blood. So let's leave those traffic jams behind and enjoy a scenic ride on one of the many riverboat tours available. But don't stand up, you'll see why. at the Hermitage now, one of the finest museums in the world, to look at some of that artwork that I mentioned earlier. It was built by Catherine the Great in the mid-1700s. It started out in what was called the Small Hermitage. Then, because of her extensive collection of libraries and artwork, she built the Great Hermitage in 1771. There's a lot to see, so let's get started. She allowed only selected guests to enter her private quarters, and it wasn't until the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 that the doors were opened to the public. The Hermitage was a specific Nazi target, and as many treasures as possible were labeled and carefully packed by the staff and hundreds of volunteers and shipped by train to the Ural Mountains to be hidden in caves. The museum staff stayed behind to clear away heaps of broken bricks and remains of charred flooring after each bomb hit the building. Brought back to its former glory, entering the staterooms of Catherine's Winter Palace offers a breathtaking view of imperial elegance, with a main staircase leading up to a collection of art so large that it would take 11 years to view if you spent 1 minute looking at each exhibit on display. At the head of the stairs, Catherine greeted aristocracy from around the world. They were always required to face her, so upon leaving would back out with heads bowed, looking down on these beautiful parquet floors made by cutting small pieces of colored hardwoods into geometric shapes, only affordable to the most affluent. Room after room, from floor to vaulted ceilings, is filled with art treasures from the world's greatest sculptors and painters, like this exquisite marble sculpture of Psyche, goddess of the soul, being revived by Cupid's kiss, done by Antonio Canova, an Italian sculptor from Venice. The paintings are beautifully displayed, and even on crowded days, there is room to view at your own pace the work of some of the world's greatest artists such as Botticelli, Da Vinci, Raphael, Monet, Renoir, Picasso, and Michelangelo's only piece in the Hermitage, The Crouching Boy. There is so much more, but I hope you have enjoyed this brief look at only a few of the Hermitage treasures on this beautiful spring day here in St. Petersburg. From one of the world's greatest museums to one of the greatest folkloric groups in Russia, Bagatitsa, who performed for us at the Simolninsky Concert Hall. I wish you could see their entire performance, but time allows for just a few highlights. Enjoy. Remember earlier I mentioned the traffic problems in St. Petersburg and the lack of rules of the road? Sure enough, on our way home from the performance, a traffic jam stopped us. The trailer truck driver in front decided he would back up so he could cross the double center line and bypass the accident. In the process, he crunched the left side of the bus. Luckily, no one was hurt and the accident happened near the docks, so we all walked back to the boat. Summoning up our courage, the next morning we boarded another bus for the 12-mile ride to the town of Pushkin, location of an impressive Baroque palace and the home of Peter the Great's second wife, Catherine I. After entering these ornate wrought iron gates, we were entertained by these two-stepping Russian musicians. During Catherine's reign, she made significant alterations to the palace, with changes from the ornate Baroque interiors with an abundance of gilded moldings to the increasingly fashionable classical style with a more symmetrical yet elegant design with stylish eye appeal. Upon entering the palace, all are greeted by Catherine dressed in her royal finest. After Peter's death, she became Empress of Russia and was considered a just and fair ruler. Unlike many royals, she and Peter were very much in love, and for every battle victory during his reign, she commissioned a statue to glorify each one of them. And as we can see, he became very successful, starting as a foot soldier and sailor, working his way up to general and admiral. During her declining years, at the southern wing of the palace, she had this path built to make it easier to walk to her beloved gardens. In the 1780s, this unique architectural complex in the style of an ancient Roman bathhouse was added. Upon her death, the property was inherited by her daughter, Empress Elizabeth, who turned the estate into a gala summer residence. The palaces were made more elaborate, with pavilions added for entertaining and parks enlarged with lakes for boating and wildlife. The elaborate splendor caught everyone's attention, and Pushkin became the place of official receptions for Russian nobility and representatives from foreign states visiting on diplomatic missions, and the current president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, uses the palace as a summer retreat. The park was given the name Pushkin in 1937 to mark the 100th birthday of Russia's greatest poet, Alexander Pushkin, who had known the park as a boy and lived nearby. Another must on what to see in St. Petersburg is Pieterhoff Park, often referred to as the Russian Versailles. Built by Peter the Great in the 18th century, it's an amazing complex of palaces, gardens, and golden fountains. I can't wait to see the place, so let's begin our visit. He designed much of Peterhoff himself, and it's to his credit, with winters much like here in the Northeast, he was able to create elaborate gardens and fountains that have survived the elements for almost 300 years. And for us Vermonters, coming upon this patch of cowslips and Dutchman's breeches was a nice surprise, so much like home, as was being greeted by this cute and curious Russian squirrel. Upon Peter's death, his daughter Elizabeth commissioned the well-known designer of the Hermitage, Bartolomeo Rastrelli, to upgrade the aging palace. He kept its original design, but added the two white cupolas at the end of the wings. Yellow and white, it is majestic but not overwhelming, and provides the perfect backdrop to the formal gardens and cascade of fountains and statues. The most famous being the Grand Cascade, comprised of 64 different fountains and over 200 bronze statues. At the center is this spectacular statue of Samson, wrestling the jaws of a lion. Elsewhere in the park, the range and diversity of fountains is astounding, like the beautiful Greek temple to the joke fountains, including this one that sprays unwary passersby, like my traveling companions who were unlucky enough to step on a hidden trigger stone. Peterhoff Park is breathtaking and gives you an idea of just how lavish Peter the Great's lifestyle was. Certainly his wealth and taste for luxury rivaled that of other European royalty, and as with them, this led to animosity and eventually the end of aristocratic rule with the assassination of Nicholas II in 1918. They tell us they get just 86 days of sunshine here in St. Petersburg, and we're glad that we got some of them so we could make this beautiful video to share with all of you. For Across the Fence, I'm Lyn Jarvis along a canal here in historic St. Petersburg. Thank you for watching.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.